Hello, I'm Ab Sesay, and today let's look at 5 different portrait lighting setups and discuss topics like relative size of your light in relation to the distance you put your subject, plus what's the real difference between a white and silver umbrella, and getting multiple looks from one setup, plus more. And I'm only going to use the Westcott 45-degree Deep Focus Reflector and the Westcott 7-foot white and silver umbrellas with a sock. So you can try all this at home with an extremely affordable kit. So for our first lighting setup, I'm going to discuss how we got this portrait using 2 lights. The first step was deciding the placement of the main light. I wanted my main light to only illuminate the subject's face and our fill light to give us more of a moody nighttime glow. I used some of my favorite gels, which I will discuss in this video as well. So when we have to discuss hard versus soft light, having the light close will produce softer and less bright highlights. The light will also fall off quickly before it reaches the background. Now we're going to move the light further away. See the difference when I have the light 6 feet away? So since the light is closer to the subject, it is relatively larger and thus softer. The highlights are not as bright because the light itself does not need to be as bright to still properly illuminate our model. But when we move the light away, you see it becomes smaller relative to the size of our subject, and it becomes a lot harder. So when placing my light, I'm thinking about the effect it's going to have on my subject and its effect on the entire scene. So knowing that I want a dark and moody look with flattering light on the skin, I am going to start with my main light very close to our model. I also have the sock that comes with the Westcott 45-degree reflector kit over the light, turning it into a mini softbox. I then put a 1/4 CTS over it to warm it up. Then using the Westcott 7-foot umbrella, which is equivalent to a 65-inch umbrella from most other brands, I gelled it using a Roscoe bluish green gel to give me tone to my shadows. Here my fill light is about 3 stops below the main light. You will also see me using these Kupo double combi clamps like a double super clamp to hold the power adapters. This is the first time shooting with Westcott lights, and leaving them plugged in, I can run the modeling lights the entire time I shoot as long as the battery starts with a decent charge. For this series of images, I had her face the main light and also turn her head away from it to give me different moods. And I also had her sit down for some images to treat them more like a fashion shoot than a dramatic portrait shoot. So the position of my main light, it wasn't arbitrary, but done to give me the effect that I wanted. So before I answer the question about which should I use, a silver or white umbrella, let me walk you through another simple portrait setup that is 2 setups in one. So for our next portrait setup, I'm going to use 2 lights. And from these 2 lights, I am easily going to capture 3 different looks. I'm going to use the white 7-foot umbrella, a sock, the 45-degree reflector, and also show the importance of using flags. So here is the light coming from the umbrella. Now I could stop here and have a beautiful portrait, but now watch the model's hand as I introduce the flag. Now the model's face is the brightest thing in the portrait, and we draw more attention to it. Now adding the edge light, we separate our subject from the background even more. And here is the edge light all by itself. So now let's have our model simply change her pose and turn off our umbrella, and we get this dark and moody dramatic portrait. Similar to what we did in our first setup, but the light is a little further away and much higher. I love the drama in these images. Now, if the shadows are a little bit too much for the shadow haters out there, you can bring your umbrella back, and by lowering its power by about 2 stops, you get these dramatic portraits, but with more detail in the shadows. That makes it more like you're using a bounce versus another light. So one thing that I like to say is that any well-placed light should be able to carry the entire picture. And by adjusting your ratios and the position of your subject, you can easily get different looks. This is something that I swear by. The lesson here is that your main light can easily change as soon as your subject repositions themselves. And you can go from basic to something a bit more dramatic and editorial. It's also a great technique when you get in situations where you maybe only have a chance to capture 10 frames of someone and need 2 different looks. Now for the question I get all the time. Should I use a silver or white umbrella? And as always, I'm going to say both. If I'm only going to use it as a general fill light, I would normally use white, and no matter how you zoom in or out, it looks relatively similar and the light fall off is similar as well. But that being said, I mostly use it aligned with the edge of the umbrella, whereas the silver umbrella has the ability to be focused, so you can go from a look like this to a look like this to also something that's a little bit more flat, and there's gonna be variations in between. So you don't wanna arbitrarily just put it in any position. With a white umbrella, you don't get the focusability. I'll use a giant silver umbrella when shooting dance and I want a relatively broad light on the model, but not a lot of fall off on the background. So white and silver umbrellas directly behind the camera would be another easy setup and generally flattering for simple portraits. And for our last setup, it's a bit of a fashion portrait and extremely easy to do. I simply have the Westcott 45-degree reflector directly above camera and aimed at our subject. A bit more contemporary than your standard portrait, and this is an easy setup of shooting editorial, where the focus can be as much about the clothing as it is the person. Also, this is a hard light. The reflector gives me shadows with a softer edge, which adds a bit more depth to the image, and since our model is wearing gray and the wardrobe is creating hard lines, the softness of the shadow blends less than if I use just bare bulbs. These are all small things to consider when deciding how to light an image, because as you know, there are levels to this. Definitely check the links below for the lights and the light shapers used. This entire kit that I use is very affordable and gives you a huge amount of flexibility. Please comment and I promise that I will comment back. And subscribe and like this video to see more content just like this on Adorama TV.